EduVerse PD podcast, brought to you by ProEd Education Solutions, your on-the-go professional development. Welcome to the world's first education podcast hosted by AI. Today, our AI co-hosts, Andy and Liz, are discussing an intriguing topic, the science of learning. They'll be exploring highlights from the latest Ask the Experts interview in EduVerse Newsletter, Issue 17 with three esteemed professors, Paul A. Kirschner, Carl Hendrick, and Jim Heel. So, let's jump in and join Andy and Liz as they unpack this conversation on transforming classrooms through the science of learning.
Welcome back to the EduVerse PD podcast series. I'm Andy, and today we're doing a deep dive into the world of learning and teaching.
I'm Liz, excited to be here.
Today we're going behind the scenes of an interview with three leading education experts, Professor Paul Kirschner, Professor Carl Hendrick, and Professor Jim Heel, the authors of How Learning Happens and How Teaching Happens.
These books tackled the big questions about how we learn and teach effectively. And what's cool, they each come at it from different angles. You've got Kirschner with his cognitive psychology expertise.
Right, Hendrick, who's been a classroom teacher and researcher.
And Heel, who brings experience applying evidence-informed approaches in various educational settings.
But they all share this drive to bridge the gap between research and what's happening in classrooms.
Absolutely, helping teachers understand the science behind learning so they make informed decisions about their practice.
You know, one thing that I found really interesting was they all were kind of driven to this work by a shared frustration.
Oh, really? What was that?
It was really this disconnect between research and what was actually happening in classrooms.
You mean like this gap between what we know about learning and how we actually teach?
Yeah, exactly. And Jim Heel actually said he was frustrated by seeing decades of learning science research just sitting there and not making its way into the hands of teachers.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
How do we bridge that gap?
Well, that's, I think, where their collaboration becomes so powerful.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
You've got Paul Kirschner, who's this cognitive psychology expert.
Right.
Then you've got Carl Hendrick, who has this long teaching background.
Okay.
And then Jim Heel is bringing in this crucial U.S. perspective.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So you've got all these different angles kind of coming together.
Yeah, and making it more well-rounded.
Exactly. And, you know, here's where I think things get really fascinating.
Okay, I'm ready.
One of the biggest takeaways from their work is that learning is often counterintuitive.
Counterintuitive? What do you mean by that?
So, like, what feels easy and natural may not actually be the best way to learn.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, so give me an example.
Carl Hendrick uses this phrase, desirable difficulties.
Desirable difficulties. I've heard that before.
Okay, yeah, so it describes how challenges that feel tough in the moment can lead to much deeper learning in the long run.
So it's like short-term pain for long-term gain.
Exactly, and they're actually writing a whole new book dedicated to this concept.
Oh, wow. They must be really passionate about it.
Yeah, they are. And you know what's really interesting is that they were surprised by how many teachers felt like they were encountering this information for the first time when they read these books.
Really? So teachers weren't already aware of this research?
A lot of them weren't, and it's kind of like a whole generation of teachers were missing out on these really key principles.
It's almost like we're failing them in a way, right?
Yeah, in a way, and Carl Hendrick actually compared it to 19th century medicine.
Oh, wow, okay.
When things like germ theory, it took forever for those ideas to catch on.
Yeah, that's a great comparison.
And Jim Heel sees this disconnect happening today, especially when it comes to understanding human memory.
Human memory. Yeah, I mean, that's like fundamental to learning, right?
Exactly. And he's particularly worried that we're expecting students to hold way too much information in their working memory.
Which is limited.
Yes, very limited.
Okay, so then what can we do about that? I mean, how can we actually apply this research in the classroom?
Well, the good news is that these experts, they didn't just want to highlight problems.
Right, they want to help.
Exactly. They wanted to give teachers practical tools.
Okay, well, what kind of tools are we talking about?
Well, Jim Heel is really big on understanding memory.
Okay, so like encoding, retrieval, and all that.
Exactly. And he says it's key for teachers to really grasp those concepts.
I can see how that would change how you teach.
Yeah, it completely changes how you approach lesson planning, how you interact with students.
It's like looking under the hood to see how everything works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that need to change, Paul Kirschner introduces this concept of the 10 deadly sins of education.
Oh, the 10 deadly sins. That sounds interesting. What are they?
These are like common beliefs and practices that sound good, but actually hinder learning.
Okay, so like what, for example?
Well, one of them is the learning pyramid.
The learning pyramid. Oh, you mean the one that says we learn best by doing and teaching others?
And lecturing is at the bottom.
Yeah, exactly that one.
So it's appealing.
Right, it seems intuitive.
But the experts point out that it's actually based on misinterpretations and oversimplifications of the research.
So it's not really accurate.
Not really. And another one is learning styles.
Oh, learning styles.
Yeah.
Yeah, like visual learners and auditory learners.
Yeah, that whole thing.
Right. Everybody thinks about that.
But the thing is, the research doesn't really support it. Catering to those supposed learning styles doesn't lead to better learning outcomes.
So it's another myth busted.
Exactly. And it's just one of those things that sounds good,
Right.
but doesn't hold up when you look at the evidence.
So then the question becomes, what are we missing in teacher preparation?
That's a great question. And Hendrick actually points to a major misunderstanding of constructivism in education.
Oh, constructivism. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, it's often misinterpreted, and it leads to ineffective teaching strategies.
And Jim Heal, he emphasizes the need for a more practical experience for new teachers, right?
Exactly. He says they need opportunities to apply these principles in real-world settings.
Not just learn about them in a book.
Exactly. And Paul Kirschner, he uses this really powerful analogy. He says, teachers without a solid understanding of learning science are like doctors who don't understand biology or anatomy.
Wow, that's a scary thought.
It is, and it really underscores how important this knowledge is.
So how does all of this change the role of teachers?
Well, that's a great question. And Jim Heal emphasizes that while these books, they offer these reliable principles,
Right.
It's not a one-and-done solution.
Okay.
It's about taking those principles and putting in the time and effort to really hone your craft through structured practice.
So it's like ongoing professional development.
Exactly. And it's not just something you learn once and then you're good.
Got it.
It's like learning a musical instrument.
Oh, yeah, you need to practice.
You need to understand the theory,
Uh-huh.
but then you have to put in the hours.
To really get good at it.
Exactly.
So what are some of the key takeaways that these experts want educators to really remember?
Well, Hendrick makes it clear that there's a science of learning, but there's not a rigid step-by-step science of teaching.
Okay, so it's not like a recipe.
Right. It's more about understanding the probabilities and making informed choices based on the evidence.
So it's more nuanced than that.
Exactly.
And what about Jim Heal? What does he want teachers to take away from this?
He really drives home the point that teaching is not just some innate talent, you either have or you don't.
Right.
It's a complex skill that requires continuous refinement.
Like any other profession.
Exactly.
Okay. And what about Paul Kirschner? Does he have any final thoughts?
He has this really inspiring message, and he says that great teachers aren't born, they're made.
Oh, I love that message.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
And it means anyone can become a great teacher.
Exactly. And he really believes that with a solid understanding of learning fundamentals, any teacher can be effective and even better enjoy the process.
Which is so important.
And to make that knowledge more accessible, they've actually launched a professional development course based on their books.
Oh, wow. That's great. So they're really putting their money where their mouth is.
They are, and it's an incredible resource for diving deeper into the research and really putting these ideas into practice.
We were talking about those 10 deadly sins of education.
Yeah, those are really interesting.
I think it's worth revisiting them because they're so widespread.
Yeah, if they really are.
And they can hinder student learning.
You're right. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about making sure our teaching practices are actually effective.
And backed by evidence. Like think about that learning pyramid, for example.
Okay.
It suggests we learn best by doing and teaching others.
Right.
While lecturing is supposedly the least effective method.
Yeah, that visual is so ingrained in our minds.
It really is.
But like you said earlier, the research doesn't support it.
It doesn't, and it's based on all these misinterpretations and oversimplifications.
But like a classic example of an appealing idea that doesn't actually hold up.
Right.
When you really look closely at it.
And then there's a whole myth of learning styles.
Oh yeah, visual, auditory, kinesthetic.
Everyone's heard of that.
But tailoring lessons to those supposed styles doesn't improve learning.
It really doesn't.
It's one of those things that sounds good, but the evidence just isn't there.
Yeah, it's like those personality quizzes,
Oh, yeah.
that tell you what kind of animal you are.
Yeah, fun, but not exactly scientifically rigorous.
Exactly. And I think these myths really highlight how important it is to constantly question our assumptions as teachers.
Absolutely, and to look for that evidence.
Yeah, to really support our teaching.
Speaking of evidence, let's go back to understanding memory for a second.
Okay, yes, Jim Heal really emphasizes that.
He does. He said, understanding how memory works, how we learn and remember information, and how the way we think influences what we know is absolutely crucial.
He's right, though. If we don't understand how memory works, it's like trying to build a house without a solid foundation.
You can't do it.
Exactly. And once we understand how memory works, it can completely change how we teach.
How so?
Well, we start thinking about how we present information, how we engage students, and how we connect new knowledge to what they already know.
It's like creating those light bulb moments for students.
Exactly, those aha moments when everything clicks into place.
I love that.
Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something that's on everyone's mind these days.
What's that?
Technology and artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah, AI is changing everything.
It's both exciting and a little bit daunting, especially for us as educators.
I agree. And Carl Hendrick brought up a really interesting point about how AI is impacting assessment.
Oh yeah, how so?
With tools like ChatGPT, students can generate all this amazing work without necessarily understanding the material.
Right, that's a problem.
It is, and it raises this question of how can we make sure assessments are still meaningful?
And accurately reflect student learning.
Exactly, especially in this age of AI.
Yeah, it's a challenge that we all need to be thinking about.
It's forcing us to rethink how we approach assessments.
And how we use AI in a way that actually helps education.
Instead of undermining it.
Right.
So on that note, what advice do these experts have for new educators who are entering this field?
Oh, that's a great question.
That's rapidly changing by the day.
Yeah, Jim Heal had some really insightful advice.
Okay, what did he say?
Well, he encourages new teachers to be critical thinkers.
Oh, that's so important.
He says, don't just accept the way things have always been done.
Question everything.
Yeah, question traditional practices, check them against the evidence.
And speak up when things aren't right.
Exactly. Speak up when you see those learning science principles being violated.
So don't be afraid to rock the boat a little bit.
Not at all. Be an advocate for effective learning.
I love that.
Me too. And, I think it's important to take a step back and look at the bigger picture here.
What do you mean?
Well, we've explored the science of learning, we've debunked some common myths, and we've talked about all these practical strategies that can make a real difference in the classroom.
Right, and I think there's a deeper message here that goes beyond those specific strategies and tools.
Oh, definitely. What would you say that message is?
Well, I think it's this idea that teaching is about so much more than just delivering content.
Yes, tell me more.
It's about understanding and nurturing the human mind, recognizing the unique strength and challenges and potential of every student.
I love that.
It's about approaching teaching as a calling, as this perfection that can really transform lives. So as we move into the final part of this episode, we want to leave you with this thought. How does this idea of teaching as a process of understanding and nurturing the human mind resonate with you? And the things that we teach our students, the knowledge and the skill, they have this ripple effect, impacting their lives, their communities, and ultimately the world.
It's bigger than just us.
It is, and it's a powerful reminder that what we do as educators really matters.
It really does.
So keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference for your students.
We'll be here cheering you on.
It's been a fantastic journey.
Absolutely. Really enjoyed exploring these ideas with you and our listeners.
Until next time, keep those minds engaged and those learning sparks flying.
What an enlightening conversation. A big thank you to Andy and Liz for breaking down the powerful insights from the interview with Professors Paul A. Kirschner, Carl Hendrick, and Jim Heal on the science of learning. If you'd like to explore the full interview, be sure to check out EduVerse Newsletter, issue 17, available on our website at www.proed.com.vn/eduverse. And don't forget, EduVerse is always looking for fresh perspectives. If you have an idea or experience to share, we'd love to hear from you. Visit our website to submit your article and join us in inspiring educators worldwide. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to having you join us next time on the EduVerse PD podcast, brought to you by ProEd Education Solutions. See you soon.